This is the hip internal rotation assessment. To perform this assessment, you're going to need an elevated surface to sit on. So we're sitting down with the knees bent roughly 90 degrees and they're hip width apart. You can place your hands on top of the elevated surface. If you're on a box like this, you can grip the side. We want the torso to be sitting up straight. As we perform this assessment, we don't want to be leaning the torso back. So we set ourselves sitting up straight. The first thing we do, we're going to test one leg at a time. So we're going to lift the leg off the elevated surface in this position. We're keeping the knee directly in front of the hip. And what we're going to look at is how much can we internally rotate that hip. So lifting the foot out to the side by rotating that hip, making sure the knee is not moving. We're keeping the knee fixed in space and being able to hold that for roughly 15 seconds, bringing it back and placing the leg back on the elevated surface. We repeat on the opposite side, lift up, keep the knee fixed in space, internally rotate the hip, keep the foot pointing forward, hold that for roughly 15 seconds. So we get a good perspective of the angle of the shin away from that perpendicular point to the floor. That's what we're trying to measure here, and we want to assess both sides. Now, one common mistake that we see in this assessment is allowing the hip to hike. So that looks like this. We lift up, and then as we go, we start to lift this hip up, okay? And that's cheating the exercise. It's not isolating the hip internal rotation. So keep your sit bone on the elevated surface. Focus on keeping your glutes on the elevated surface and keeping the torso as upright as possible as you perform that hip internal rotation. When videoing this for your assessment, you want the camera pointing at you from a front view. Like I said before, we're looking at what angle you can get those shins to away from the perpendicular line to assess your hip internal rotation. So this is the hip internal rotation assessment.